Thanks so much for listening to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange. I'm sitting in the kitchen at Perch Hill and the garden's looking particularly lovely at the moment. And so I just wanted to do a kind of NB to anyone who's within shouting distance of Perch Hill, or not quite shouting distance, but travel distance, which is we're open for the next few months, a few days a month. And yeah, it would be really lovely to see you. So go on our website and you'll find all the details of booking there. You can book lunch on 3 different time slots, or you can just come and wander around the garden. So it's garden only or garden visit plus lunch. So I hope to see some of you then. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven. And today I am very excited, thrilled actually, to be joined by Patrick Grant. And I'm a big fan of Patrick. And many of you will know he is on The Sewing Bee, which, to be honest, is one of mine and my entire family's favourite programmes. I have grown-up children and I have a husband who's never seen a sewing machine in his life. But I quite often come in of an evening if I've been working and I see him catching up on The Sewing Bee on his own, which I think is rather hilarious because he loves Esme and Patrick so much as a combination. And the different compares who've come and gone. Anyway, good morning and welcome, Patrick. It's such an honour to have you here.
Thank you very much indeed for having me. And thank you for being such a great fan of Sewing Bee.
Oh,
well, we're delighted. We do get a very warm reception to the show, pretty much universally, actually.
Yeah.
And I know that Esme is as delighted as I am by how well the show has gone down over the years and continues to go down. New series coming very soon.
Good.
And another one recording in the autumn. So, yeah, continues to be enjoyed by lots and lots of people, which is terrific.
It is. It's just so clever that it's, you know, you don't need to be a dressmaker. I mean, I love the pottery throwdown too, but somehow for me, the whole narrative of that you've got, the whole sort of trajectory from the first task to the last. Yeah, it's just very, very compelling. It's really, really good television and it's got absolutely feel good. And so let's just talk about that a little bit. So you were there from the get-go, weren't you?
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be asked to come along and try out to be a judge. I think the lady who commissioned Sewing Bee for BBC Two had been the commissioner on BBC Four and had seen me in a couple of documentaries, one about Savile Row and one about Harris Tweed that I was involved with. And I think she had chucked my name in the hat as a potential judge through having seen me wandering about in the Hebrides. And yeah, I tested with a few different people and then a few more. And eventually, at the very last minute, we ended up with the very lovely May Martin. Claudia Winkleman took over the helm as presenter and we got started and nobody really expected it to be much, you know, above 1 million viewers. So I think we got twice as many as that in the first series and it went from strength to strength thereafter. As you say, we've had some extraordinarily brilliant hosts on the show. Claudia, replaced by Jo, replaced by Sarah, temporarily replaced by the amazing Kyle. Yeah. And Sarah is back again post having kids for this one. And it's a brilliant series, the one that's coming up. So it's just, as you say, it's warm telly that celebrates people's love for doing something great with their hands. You know, as humans, we like to do stuff, physical stuff. And so much of that has been removed from our lives by the kind of digitization and automation of the way everything works. And we have a real longing for it. And it's, I think, the reason why so many of us garden and so many of us make all sorts of things. I'm a huge fan of the pottery throwdown. Yeah. But, you know, I love all sorts of making crafts. So there's something lovely about watching people with great passion go through these quite difficult challenges and the bond that they form with each other and the fun that we have with them. It's just, you know, it's genuinely brilliant fun to film. And I think you can see that on screen.
You really can.
We have a lot. I mean, it doesn't really feel like work, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Work is difficult. Running community clothing is difficult. Making and running a business is tough.
Yeah.
Going and making a bit of telly where you're just asked to, have a look at some nice stuff that people have made and say a few words about it. Ain't that hard?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the lovely celebration of the amateur, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing that I think I'm not so keen on the professional MasterChef and all those, because you feel less like them. You feel that they've come already from, the university of whatever. And one of the reasons I love it is that these are people who've really learnt it on their own, often in a little sort of box room with their sewing machine. And that's very touching. And I love the fact that you have such a wide and sort of balance between men and women. And how is the selection? Or perhaps you can't tell us. Perhaps it's
no. I can tell you all about it, because people are going through it at the moment, and we want to encourage as many people as possible to apply. The selection process is quite tough, as you might imagine. We typically get between 3,000 and 4,000 people applying each year.
Wow.
They send through a portfolio of work. One of our lovely production team gives you a ring. I think at this point, you have to be able to hold a good conversation, because ultimately we're making TV.
Yeah.
So, they look at everybody's portfolio, then they phone them up for a chat. And then they will select a bunch of people from those chats to go and do a bit of filming with. I think in the past it used to be filmed in person, but I think since COVID it is done over Zoom. So there is a kind of Zoom-based producer chat with a bit of making going on. And then about 100 people are invited to a series of in-person, under lights, in front of cameras, live challenge. So they're typically relatively straightforward, but with some tricky element. And people have to go through it like they have. And, the cameras are poking in the face and the producer's going, so what are you doing now? And why have you done it like that? And oops, have you done that wrong? And, that is done to kind of mimic the pressure and the just exactly the kind of feel that it is, intensity that there is in the show, and also the kind of constant interruption. And if people can't carry on making while somebody's chatting to them, then they're probably not going to do terribly well. Because, I mean, ultimately, it is a making show, but it is also a bit of TV. So people have to be able to deal with the TV side of it. And then, they also make sure that everybody is kind of mentally robust and all of this sort of stuff. And
do they have to be away from home? I mean, I know the Bake Off, they have to be away from home for weeks on end, don't they?
It's a pretty hefty. I mean, we film over about 7 weeks.
Right.
So we film 10 episodes over 7 weeks. 2 episodes. An episode is a couple of days each.
Yeah. And
the timing is never the same 1 week following the next. So some weeks we'll do 1, some weeks we'll do 2. So there's a pretty big commitment. In terms of, you have to come. We tend to film 2 episodes almost back to back.
Yeah.
So we film 1, then you get a day off, and then you film another one, just to minimize the traveling around. We're trying to make the program in a way that, is as sustainable as possible. So people will travel up, we'll do 2, and then people will travel home. So you do have to be away from home for a bit. And obviously the more successful you are, the longer you have to be away from home. But everybody, of course, has to book the whole time off work and keep it secret from their families and friends and everything else, for ages.
Yeah. Gosh, so it's quite a process, quite a daunting process.
Yeah. And of course, it's not just, you have to be able to sew relatively quickly. You have to be able to sew and follow a pattern. I mean, I think last year, quite a lot of our contestants were brilliantly creative, but were a bit less experienced at following patterns. And so a lot of them struggled with the time constraints. We do test the challenges incredibly rigorously. And we actually have a panel of former contestants. So once we've devised a challenge, we give it to them. And not always, not all people that have got to the final, people that have gone out at different stages. So we time test them all very rigorously. So we know that there's plenty of time, but, some people are better at following these instructions than others. And this year's lot were much better. I mean, last year, I think there were lots of people that struggled week after week with getting things done on time. And viewers were saying, "Oh, you don't give them enough time." We give them plenty of time.
Yeah.
They just have to get on with it.
Yeah. And so tell us how you got spotted really by the team that was looking to put together Sewing Bee. So you mentioned Savile Row, but tell us a little bit about all of that.
Well, I'd been in a documentary series on Channel 4. The year after I arrived on Savile Row, BBC4 commissioned a sort of behind-the-scenes, fly-on-the-wall documentary series, which was made by a terrific documentarian called Ian Denyer. And he came to Savile Row and filmed lots of us, and we invited him to come and film us doing all sorts of other things. I took him up to the Isle of Harris to, come with me on a buying trip, meet some of the weavers that we worked with up there. And while we were there, news broke that the biggest mill on the island had been taken over by a Yorkshire textile magnate called William Haggis. And
literally haggis,
spelt with an A rather than an I at the end. But,
okay.
Haggas rather than haggis. But
Okay.
and sort of the island was kind of up in arms. He decided he was going to industrialize the tweed production. He was going to boil it down to like 4 patterns, and he was only going to sell it to his own clothing company. And so there was sort of uproar. And we were there while all of this kind of happened.
Because it's a real cottage industry, isn't it? I mean, so literally,
it's an interesting mix actually, because
right.
you've got the main mills which do the spinning and the dyeing.
Mm-hmm.
You then have the weaving, which takes place in and around the island. As you say, very much cottage industry. I mean, usually a separate shed on the side of the cottage, but and then the fabric comes back to the main mills where it is finished and accredited, stamped, and all the rest of it. So it's a very unique and interesting mixture. But, what has always been lovely is that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of patterns, and they reflect all of the colours of the island, and they reflect the skill of the individual weavers, and it's it's a remarkably diverse thing.
Yeah.
And anyway, so there was uproar at Mr. Haggis's plan. I mean, it was a plan born out of certain amount of desire to see the industry go forward. The industry was struggling, and he thought that this was the way to fix it. But when the Savile Row documentary aired, and there was this bit about Harris Tweed in there, lots and lots of people got in touch with me, wrote to me at Savile Row, came into the shop, phoned up, sent emails, did all sorts. And so I got back in touch with the BBC and said, look, there's huge interest in what's happening there.
Yeah.
We should probably follow it up. And they said yes. So Ian, who made the Savile Row documentary, and I sort of set off to Harris again, and he made this fantastic show. And both shows were really, really well watched. And I think the Savile Row documentary was the most watched show on BBC4 that year, and it actually ended up going out on BBC Two, and it got repeated endlessly. It was before Catch Up was as prominent as it was, and that was it. And I think, as I say, Emma, who was our commissioner, I think thought, well, he'll do. He might be worth looking at. But as I say, I did go through a series of tests with lots of different female judges, and then one other bloke, and then more female possible judges before we ended up with May. And then May was replaced by Esme a few years later. And she has done, so May, I think, did the first 3, and Esme has done 4 to 11. 11 is coming soon. And we'll, of course, be doing 12, which will be later this year. So, yeah, we've formed a nice little team there. But we've had a lot of the same people working on the show.
Have you?
Behind the scenes, Suzanne Rock and Catherine Lewandon, who were our producers right back at the beginning, did almost all of them. And then, we've others, Rebecca, who now does it, and Tom, have worked on it for many years. And lots of the camera team and the sound team and the lighting and the spot, all those guys are the same. So it does feel like a great big family.
Yeah, how lovely.
And, there's myself and one of the camera guys, a guy called Aaron. We've been on it since the beginning. He missed a couple of episodes. He also does Bake Off and pottery and everything else. He's the jib operator, very specialist.
Okay.
But so I've done more. I think actually the second or third episode of the series that's coming out was the 100th sewing bee that we recorded.
That's so great. And when's the transmission date for the next?
Sometime soon. I don't know. Normally goes out in May, but obviously it's not going out in May. We don't know. They never tell us until it's in the Radio Times. We never know.
Okay. The other thing you mentioned was community clothing. So I would love you to tell us about that. So I know that's a huge passion of yours and something you've been more involved with, again, for a very long time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's my job. That's what I do for a living. I run community clothing. I've worked in clothing for 20 years, but I started community clothing back in 2016. It was a response to a huge sort of overwhelming feeling that we had to do something to stop the further decline of the textile industry in this country. We've got an amazing textile industry here. We have been at the forefront of exceptional quality textiles and clothing forever. You know, from the Middle Ages right the way through the Industrial Revolution to now, we make amazing stuff. And I'd seen lots and lots of mills and factories close in my lifetime. My granddad worked in textiles. Firm he worked for closed down, as many, many others did in the borders where he was based. And I, in 2015, one of my big suppliers, which is where I'm sitting today, a company called Cookson and Clegg in Blackburn, their owners had taken the decision that they were going to have to close it down. And it's a factory that had been in Blackburn since 1860. It had extraordinary history in this town, and this town was a textile town like many other towns in Lancashire and Yorkshire and the East Midlands and the south of Scotland. You know, these were areas where textile jobs were absolutely the centre of everything that built these towns and created their identities. And Blackburn, at one point in time, like many others, you know, almost 50% of all people in this town worked in textiles. And at that time, the businesses were owned by people who lived and worked in these towns, you know, in the sort of 1880s. 80+% of all Lancashire's mills were owned by people that were born in Lancashire. So the money stayed locally. You know, they created so much opportunity, so much benefit for all of the community here. And you know, the surplus profits at the end of the day came back in because, you know, if mill owners had extra money, they, you know, built a hospital or built a school or built almshouses or made a park or did whatever. And it was the lifeblood of everything that happened here. And to think that the last of the Victorian textile businesses was about to be shut was too much for me. Yeah. So luckily at the time I had a successful business elsewhere. Yeah. So I bought Cookson and Clegg in 2015. And then I thought, right, okay, it's losing an absolute ton of money. How do we fix this? How do we deal with the fact that most people buy inexpensive but quite low quality clothes that are made thousands of miles away, and these businesses, you know, can't find a way to fill themselves up? You know, we had factories like Cookson's that were empty for half a year. We've got textile mills that were, you know, busy for a few months, quiet for a few months, busy for a few months. You know, the loss of all of the kind of bulk manufacturing to other places where it was much cheaper meant that there was just sort of small specialist pockets, and they were struggling. And I thought, look, I'm going to do something about this. People in the UK actually would like to support British businesses. You know, statistically, over 70% of people would rather buy something made in their own local community than something made somewhere else. There's a desperate shortage of good quality clothes. You know, all the places that used to sell us good socks, good pants, good jumpers, it's all gone. You know, people have stopped making clothing. You know, all those places there you used to go when I was a kid, you know, British High Street, there were dependable sources of clothing. Those businesses have all become fashion businesses. They all want to sell fashion, and nobody makes clothing anymore. And I thought, look, this is just daft. Like, we've got people would like to support British communities, buy British stuff. People want good quality clothes that aren't going to cost the earth. And factories that make great quality clothes are desperate for work. And I'm like, there must be a way to make all of that work. And so I just sort of went back to basics on the business model. Like, where are we spending our money? You know, most fashion businesses spend less than 25% of the price you pay on the clothes they make. Yeah. You know, so anywhere you go, British High Street, you know, all those famous old department stores, less than 25% of what the price you pay goes on the spinning, the growing, the weaving, the dyeing, the making, all of that stuff. Many of them spend more money on marketing than they do on making the product. Certainly at the designer end, they spend so much more on marketing than on making the product. And I thought, well, that's just daft. Why don't we cut all that stuff out? Also, endless new stuff. New. This mad hamster wheel of newness that we're all like spinning on. We're like, well, the basic clothes that we buy don't need to change every year. This jacket I'm wearing will be the same in 5 years' time as it will be today. And there's no harm in that. If you like it, you wear it,
Absolutely.
you wear it out, you'd be quite happy to get another one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pants and socks. We don't need to change those all the time. Like, just make the best version of these things that we can. A great t-shirt, a great pair of chinos, a really good woolen jumper made with fantastic quality lamb's wool, spun in Yorkshire, knitted in Scotland. All of that stuff is,
I'm convinced.
We have this really lovely little cartoon, and it's a picture of a sock, and there's a speech bubble that comes out of the sock, and it just says, I'm a really good sock. And that is our philosophy. If you just make a really good product and you put it for sale at a price that most people can afford, our socks start at £6.50, but they're made in a factory in Leicester that's been making socks for 125 years. And if you just do something good and you price it well, you don't need to spend millions of pounds getting Instagram influencers and Kardashians to sell it to you. Yeah. You pull the sock on, you go, bloody hell, this is good. I'll have another one. And that's the philosophy. And today we work with 52 factories in 41 towns across the UK. We've created nearly 500,000 hours of well-paid skilled work.
That's such a triumph.
It's great. It makes me really proud to think that we are actually keeping some of these factories alive. And not just that, we're helping them get the confidence to invest in their futures, to train more people, to invest in newer machinery, to invest in better facilities, to build something that people want to come and work at. And what's really interesting, I think, and it's the point that I made in my book, which came out in paperback last week.
Called what?
Called Less. The book is called Less. It's published by HarperCollins, and it's about consumption and quality and work. The interesting thing is, many of us used to have jobs making things. And those jobs, whilst they weren't the best paid jobs on the planet, they were jobs that had a great deal of satisfaction. And the people that I work with in the factories that I partner with for community clothing all express the view that they're proud of the work that they do. They're proud to be skilled. They're proud to use their hands and their minds to make something brilliant. And all of that work was a big part of what we did as a society. Where we first settled, we were all farmers, but some of the people in those communities made stuff. And eventually, farming became more mechanized, but more people got into making stuff. And when I was born, there were about 8.5 million people in the UK who made stuff for a living. Gosh. And now that number's more like 2.5.
Yeah.
And that work is important work, and it's good work. And the interesting thing is, we now, middle-class people, now spend substantial sums of money learning to throw pots and upholster chairs and weave baskets. That could have been our job. Yeah. We pay money to do for fun what used to be people's work. And that feels like we've sort of got something wrong.
Yeah, that is so true. That's so true. Well, I hope Less is available on Audible, because I've got a long drive later today. I'm going to be plugging in,
Read by
Patrick.
me as well.
Oh,
Read
good.
by me. Yeah, that was hard work.
Yeah.
That was a lot of talking in a small room.
So I guess, as we're on a gardening podcast, I want to bring us back to, we haven't talked about it yet, but about gardening, because that is another more recent passion for you, isn't it?
Well, it's not actually that recent. I've always been a very keen gardener. Both of my parents were mad keen gardeners. My dad was big on growing veg, and my mum was more flowers with a bit of veg and a bit of fruit, and still is. But my
and she's in Edinburgh, isn't she?
She's in Edinburgh. Yeah, she has a brilliant garden which she absolutely loves to bits, and is the source of almost all of her happiness, and it's the thing that brings structure to everything that she does. You know, and every day, despite being 3 weeks after getting a new shoulder, she's back in the garden on the spade, as not what she's supposed to be doing.
No.
But
good physio.
She loves
in some
it.
ways.
She loves it. She loves being in the garden. She loves that the cycle. Every time she came to visit me, there'd be a couple of seedlings in a bit of soggy tissue. Stuff would arrive in the post, wrapped up in soggy loo roll, in a poly bag, in an envelope. Things would arrive wherever it was I was living. I just thought you'd like these. Anyway, so wherever I've lived, I've always gardened either in containers on a balcony or elsewhere. But, my first flat in Leeds, I was very lucky to have a big balcony south facing an old mansion flat in Leeds, just at the edge of Headingley. But I had loads and loads of pots, and same when I lived in Liverpool, I had a big balcony and loads of pots there. And Oxford, I had a big roof terrace there, so I've always had that. And then I had an allotment in Oxford when I was living in Oxford, and then in London, a couple of houses without gardens. But I've always, the pots and some of the plants have been with me everywhere. And now most of them are now at my girlfriend's house in London. But I now have a big garden for the first time.
Yes.
I bought the house that I'm in. I bought 7 years ago. I only moved into it about 18 months ago. So it was It was 6 years of it was very, very derelict. People say, "Oh, are you doing a renovation? That's nice." And they show you some pictures of a new kitchen.
Yeah.
I'm like, here's a pile of stones on the ground. That's where we've come from. And quite a lot of it is still, there's a little cottage at the back, and there's a load of barns that are still very much piles of stones. But I've started on the garden. Now that the main house is up and almost finished, not quite, but it's nearly there. Curtain poles are supposed to be arriving this week from Jones.
Oh, very good.
Also make our buttons, So everything in the house, I've tried to. If I'm buying new things, I'm buying new things from people that make things really well. So tiles. I had there's an encaustic tiled floor in the hall, and some of the tiles were broken, and so I worked with Craven Dunhill Jackfield in Ironbridge. They have remade me replica tiles that will match my original Victorian tiles.
Fabulous.
Who else have I worked with? Essie, who make beautiful wood burners. They're only down the road from where I live. And there was an old 1950s Essie wood burner, beautiful blue-green enamelled sort of shell-like amazing thing. So they reconditioned that for me, put a new firebox in this beautiful old shell. So there was lots of that sort of stuff going on. But now I've turned my attention to the garden, which was a disaster area. It's quite the house at the back of the house. It's just a bit of field that goes down to the lane. The front of the house, I'm surrounded by pasture land on all sides. I'm sort of on the boundary between the Forest of Bowland National Landscape and the Yorkshire Dales National Park. I'm just in the Forest of Bowland side of the road, and I've got this incredible view out across stone-walled pasture land and trees, and the Bowland Fells on one side and the start of the Dales on the other. And I'm trying to build a garden that sort of sits nicely in its landscape, doesn't stand out like a sore thumb, because that would just look weird. But it was very, very derelict. There's a walled garden that is walled on two sides and open at the front, and I have a ha-ha, which is quite unusual for a Yorkshire house. But I have a ha-ha at the front. And at one point in time, I've got a beautiful postcard. I've got a photograph of the house from 1904. The people that lived in it at the time had obviously photographed it and used it as a postcard to send out to friends. one of those wound its way back to a local Facebook group, and somebody spotted it, sent it to me and said, "Is this your house?" I said, "Yeah, it is." But, at that point in time, obviously the garden was a source of great pride.
Yeah.
Beautiful big roses all the way up the front of the house, and huge rose bushes and some formal beds in front, all of which had gone completely. And I mean, the brambles had taken over. The brambles were about 10 foot high and covered an area about the size of a 5-a-side football pitch.
Wow, okay.
The trees had sort of self-seeded all over the place.
Yeah.
Everything had grown into everything else. All the garden buildings had kind of fallen down. There was an old greenhouse that had built into the wall of the wall garden. All the glass had gone. All the wood had gone. The stone was still there.
You're a brave man, Patrick.
Well, you
like a challenge.
I like it. Well, I don't. Yeah, I saw its potential.
Yeah.
I think it's the way with people that I think entrepreneurial people. What sets them apart is they can see something that doesn't exist. You can picture something in your mind in just the same way that I can picture community clothing 20 years from now with all of these jobs and factories and beautiful, stuff going on. I can picture the house. I mean, I'm not there yet, but it's a project, and I love it. I love a bit of hard work outside. I love, yesterday I was busy creating some new veg plots. I don't know where they went. I mean, there must have been a vegetable garden somewhere in this house, because there wouldn't have been a greenhouse and all of these potting sheds just for flowers. Yeah. So somewhere there would have been beds. I don't know where they were. I was looking at kind of Gertrude Jekyll's old garden plans and looking at where those veg plots were in relation to the garden buildings and greenhouses and things. And so I was just trying to sort of imagine where they might have been. And I've got pigs. So my pigs have been through and cleared all of the front. The front is probably nearly an acre.
Wow, God, it was
and
massive.
The back is about the same. So it's nearly 2 acres in total. But the pigs have been through and cleared most of the front. I replanted a bit of orchard. There were some very knackered fruit trees in one part, and so I'd replanted those. So I kept the pigs out of that area, but they've been through all of the rest and turned everything up.
And got rid of the
brambles.
brambles.
Dug out all the roots. Dug out all the bramble roots. Yeah. I mean, I have a bag. I have one of those big sort of 1-ton builder's bags that is overflowing with the knotty bramble roots that they've turfed up.
That they've turfed it, yeah.
Yeah, so they sort of root them up to I actually thought they might eat them, but they didn't. They just snouted them up to the surface. But I then, was able to extract them. I mean, there are still some. I keep finding brambles in what is going to be the lawn at the front. But anyway, so that's what I've been doing over the weekend. And a good friend of mine is staying, and she's been helping plant some flowers in the front. I put some in. I put a lot of roses in. I've got a big rabbit problem. And I'm not. I can't bring myself to take up the offer of everyone that lives around me, which is, as you say, to shoot them. Although I suspect that probably would be the wisest thing to do. But
and what about deer? Have you got?
No, don't have any deer. Not that I see. Not right at mine. I mean, there are deer. There's a bit of wetland on my neighbour. My neighbours are a very lovely farm called Lakeland Hall Farm, and there are plenty of deer on. There's a bit of various different habitats on that farm, and there are deer. There are plenty of deer in one bit of where they are that you see if you're out for a walk, but they don't come up near me.
Good.
I think just because I'm on the other side of the road and there's nothing. There's pretty bare pasture. There's not much cover for them where I am.
Yeah. And all the whole project you've written about in the FT, haven't you?
Yeah, I very, very fortunately, actually it was pretty much a year ago. It was at Chelsea last year. I bumped into an old friend of mine, and she had been the deputy editor of the How to Spend It section of the FT, and she'd just been made editor of House and Home. Oh. And she was asking me what I was up to, why was I at Chelsea. I said, I'm into gardening, and I was telling her about the garden and some of the things I'd been doing and some of the things I was planning to do. And she said, oh, well, Can you write about it for us? So I do a roughly monthly column that has so far gone through, pigs, scything, bird boxes, orchard regeneration, the shout out to the Westmoreland Damson Association.
Yeah, great.
All sorts of things that I've been doing. And hopefully it will continue because I really like writing it.
Yeah.
And it also reminds me that I have to keep going.
But you're a great writer. I love it. I love reading it. And then just before we wrap up, the thing that we're trying to encourage you to do is to grow some dahlias. And you're coming here to Perch Hill with your mum in August, I think.
Yeah, we're very excited. Well, mum is particularly excited.
Good.
I am excited, but I think she is more so. Yeah. Very much looking forward to it. I've popped some of your crocosmia in.
Yeah.
I've put a bit of chicken wire around a bed at the front of the house.
Yeah.
And so far the rabbits haven't got managed
through.
To get in. We've put in some nerines actually just the other day. So hopefully they will ping into life later in the summer. But I'd love to have more colour. As I say, the roses I've put in lots of roses. Thank you, David Austin, for helping me choose all of those. Lovely Liam, the senior rose consultant there. Because there were a lot of roses around the house, and it was very obvious that they were a big part of what they do. Also, the rabbits don't eat them. Although they do nibble the little young leaves, but they don't eat the stems.
No, that's why you don't want deer, because they really love roses.
Do they?
They love them.
Well, I definitely don't want deer. Anyway, they might find it difficult to get up the steps into the front garden, and the rabbits jump over that ha-ha like there's they don't care.
Or going down into it and up again, maybe.
Well, no, I see them jumping. There's a couple of bits where it's not as high, and you see them boinging up. But they're out. They're having an absolute field day. Those rabbits. I mean, this spring, this warm spring.
Yes.
I've never seen so many babies.
No. And when we last talked, you were saying you had a big snail and slug problem, but hopefully with the dry spring, that's been better this year.
I haven't seen many slugs actually.
Good.
A few, yeah. I mean, it has been extraordinarily dry. I mean, I think for Yorkshire, we went more than 4 weeks really without any rain. We've been making up for it. I was absolutely soaked to the skin yesterday. I was because I have to weed all of my veg beds. I'm really fastidious. Before I rotivated it, I wanted to weed it thoroughly. So I was hands and knees in the mud for about 6 hours yesterday.
Well, that's impressive. That's impressive.
Yeah. I can't. I'm having trouble standing up today. But, such is life.
Such is life, yes. Well, very, very lovely to talk. And thank you so much for giving us just so many lovely things to think about, I think. Harris Tweed, community clothing, gardening, of course, and the sewing bee, which is coming out soon. So thank you, Patrick, and I'll very much look forward to seeing you in August, and we'll talk again once you've started growing some dahlias.
Lovely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to Grow Cook Eat Arrange with me and the wondrous and wonderful Patrick Grant, who's one of my heroes. Next week, I'm back on my own, and I want to take you through my 20 favourite cut flowers. Some old, some new, but really the things that if I was sent to a desert island and allowed to take some plants for picking with me, what would I take? So see you then.
You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.